Rome was not the only powerful empire that ruled the ancient world. In Ethiopia and Eritrea, there was a land of high mountains and golden plains, the Tigray Plateau. On this ancient land rose one of Africa's greatest kingdoms, Aksum, the African empire that once stood shoulder to shoulder with Rome. But before we uncover the history of Aksum, hit the subscribe button so you do not miss any of history's best stories. In the early first millennium BCE, before Aksum rose, another ancient kingdom had flourished upon the same land on which it stood, the kingdom of Demet. When the ancient Sabaeans of Yemen crossed the Red Sea into these lands, they brought with them their writing and their ways of building and worship. The people of Demet learned from them and blended these ideas with their own African traditions. Out of this fusion, a more advanced society began to take shape. By the 1st century CE, the scattered highland communities had united into a single power, the kingdom of Aksum. Its capital, also called Aksum, stood proudly among the mountains. Aksum's greatness was born not only from its people, but from its place in the world. It was located between the Nile Valley and the Red Sea, between Africa's interior and the busy trade routes of Arabia and India. The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea tells us that King Zoskales, ruler of Aksum, controlled the great port of Adulis. From there, goods flowed across the seas. Ivory, gold, incense, and slaves traded for Roman glass, Egyptian linen, and Indian spices. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, Aksum had become a powerful African kingdom in its time. Its fertile highlands fed its people and livestock, while trade enriched its cities and filled royal coffers. The Red Sea ports were Aksum's golden doors to the world. Through it, the kingdom touched both the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean, trading treasures with the mighty Roman Empire itself. Roman coins have been found in Aksum and Aksumite coins in Rome, proof that the two worlds were linked by trust and commerce. What made Aksum truly remarkable was its independence and sophistication. It was the first African kingdom south of the Sahara to mint its own coins of gold, silver, and bronze. The coins were marked with inscriptions in both Greek and Ge'ez, the local Semitic tongue. The coins followed Roman weight standards, showing that Aksum's economy spoke the same language as the world's great empires. As Aksum grew richer, its kings built iconic stone stelae, giant pillars carved from single blocks of granite. Some stelae were over 20 meters tall, but the tallest of them all was the Great Stela, which once stood over 30 meters high. Though it later collapsed, it is a reminder of how high Aksum once reached. These stelae marked the tombs of the kings and nobles. As Aksumites built monuments, they also carved their own written language, Ge'ez. It became the foundation of Ethiopian literature and remains a liturgical language to this day. By the 3rd and 4th centuries CE, Aksum's strength was unmatched. Its borders stretched across Eritrea, Sudan, and along the Red Sea coast. In the early 4th century, King Ezana became the ruler of Aksum. His reign marked the zenith of Aksumite power. He united his people, expanded the kingdom's borders, and led his armies westward, defeating the Nubia and the Kushites, bringing an end to the ancient city of Meroe. His influence reached as far as Rome, Byzantium, India, and Sri Lanka. But the greatest change in Aksum's history did not come from war. It came from faith. Around 325 to 330 CE, a Syrian Christian named Frumentius, who had been captured and brought to Aksum as a boy, was also King Ezana's tutor. Through Frumentius's influence, Ezana embraced Christianity, making Aksum one of the first Christian kingdoms in the world alongside the Roman Empire under Constantine. The Patriarch of Alexandria sent blessings and consecrated Frumentius as Aksum's first bishop, binding the kingdom to the great Coptic Church of Egypt. Soon, the temples of the old gods were transformed into churches, and the sun and moon emblems on Aksum's coins were replaced by the cross. By the end of the 4th century, Aksum stood as a Christian empire, rich in trade, wisdom, and glory. Its fame extended across Africa and the Red Sea. But even as its fame grew, another kingdom still rose to challenge its power. Across the Red Sea from Aksum lay another ancient power, the Himyarite kingdom. It was located in the lands of what is now Yemen. Its capital city, Zafar, was a city of strong walls and proud merchants. During the late 3rd century CE, Himyar had united most of South Arabia, inheriting the legacy of older kingdoms like Saba and Qataban. For many years, the Red Sea was not a barrier, but a bridge. Ships sailed from Adulis, Aksum's bustling port, to Musa, Himyar's great harbor. Together, the two kingdoms thrived. They traded, prospered, and shared the sea in peace. But as time passed, something changed between them. When the Roman Empire turned to Christianity, old pagan rituals faded away. Temples no longer burned incense, and the world's demand for frankincense, the very lifeblood of Himyar's trade, began to fade. With it, Himyar's wealth and power slowly declined. But while Himyar's trade weakened, Aksum's power and wealth grew. Soon, the same waters that once joined Aksum and Himyar began to divide them as both kingdoms sought to control the Red Sea trade. Although open warfare did not occur in the 4th century, religious and political differences deepened the rivalry. Aksum had embraced Christianity under King Ezana. Across the waters, the Himyarite rulers, under kings like Abu Karib As'ad, embraced Judaism, worshiping Rahmanan, the merciful, the one God. The two kingdoms now faced each other not only as rivals in trade, but as defenders of two great faiths, Christianity and Judaism. What began as economic tension was now tangled with spiritual passion. This strained peace continued under King Ezana's rule. However, after King Ezana, the line of succession became unclear for about 150 years. Finally, in the early 6th century, the name of an Aksumite king once again appeared in history. This was King Kaleb of Aksum, also known as Ela Asbeha. During his reign, the tension between the Aksum and Himyar escalated to war. Inside Himyar, Christian merchants, travelers, and even Aksumite settlers began to face persecution. When word of these troubles reached King Kaleb of Aksum, his heart burned with anger and duty. As a Christian king, he saw himself not only as a ruler, but as a protector of believers. According to some accounts, this was around 518 CE, when early persecutions began under a Himyarite ruler opposed to Christianity. Kaleb, unable to remain silent, gathered his army in ships. They crossed the Red Sea, fought fiercely, and overthrew the anti-Christian king, placing Madkarib Yafur, a Christian vassal, on the throne. For a time, peace returned. Yet other sources tell a simpler story, that there was only one great invasion, not two, launched years later after far bloodier events. Whichever the case, peace in Himyar did not last. Around 522 CE, a Himyarite nobleman named Yusuf Asar Yathar, remembered as Dhu Nuwas, rose in rebellion. He killed the Aksumite garrison and seized the throne. Dhu Nuwas swore to purge his land of Christianity. His soldiers swept through towns and villages, giving Christians a cruel choice: renounce their faith or die. This terror reached its peak in 523 CE in the city of Najran, where thousands of Christians refused to deny their God and were executed for their faith. When news of the massacre reached Emperor Justin I of Byzantium, he called upon King Kaleb, his ally. Whether this was King Kaleb's second campaign or the one decisive invasion recorded by most historians remains a debate among historians. King Kaleb of Aksum was a man of faith. The tragedy at Najran infuriated him, and he fought back for justice. This led to a campaign that would change history forever. And so, it was recorded in history that a ruler from a sub-Saharan African kingdom crossed the Red Sea, not as a conqueror, but as a protector of the faith. Kaleb's plan was precise and unlike anything Africa had ever seen. Chronicles tell us that he gathered an army of several thousand soldiers. Along the coast of Adulis, 60 to 70 great ships swayed upon the tide, their wooden hulls newly built, some even crafted with the help of Byzantine craftsmen from the Christian empire beyond the sea. When the northeast monsoon winds began to blow, the ships set to sail. On the other side of the sea, Dhu Nuwas, the defiant king of Himyar, prepared for their arrival. Determined to protect his kingdom, he stretched iron chains across the harbors and fortified the ports of Mecca and Aden, turning the coast into walls of resistance. But chains could not hold back the determination of Kaleb's army. The Aksumite ships broke through the barriers and landed along the Arabian coast, likely near modern Mecca or Aden. From there, they marched inland toward Zafar, the mountain capital of Himyar. What followed was the decisive battle of 525 CE. The Himyarite soldiers fought with desperate bravery, but Aksum's army was larger, better armed, and better led. When the dust cleared, Aksum stood victorious. As for Dhu Nuwas, his end remains a story told in many ways. Some say he fell in battle. Others say that, refusing to surrender, he rode his horse into the sea and vanished beneath the waves. His death marked the end of Jewish royal rule in Himyar, and for the Christians who had suffered, it was the dawn of deliverance. But King Kaleb was not blinded by triumph. He knew that Himyar was the gateway of the Red Sea, a bridge between Rome, India, and Africa, where gold, ivory, and incense passed like lifeblood. Whoever ruled Himyar controlled the trade of the world, yet Kaleb was not a greedy king. Rather than claim the land for himself, he made a wiser choice. He appointed Sumyafa Ashwa, a Himyarite Christian noble known to the Greeks as Esimophaeus, to rule Himyar under Aksum's protection. Through this act, Aksum ruled indirectly, ensuring peace and loyalty without the burden of conquest. Soon, peace returned to the kingdom. Under Kaleb's guidance, churches were rebuilt. Najran, once a place of sorrow, became a holy place of pilgrimage. Stone inscriptions in Yemen spoke of Kaleb's triumph and dedication to the Christian God. From that moment, Aksum was no longer just a kingdom. It had become a transcontinental empire, stretching across both sides of the Red Sea. Inscriptions proudly declared King Kaleb of Aksum as the ruler over the Himyarites, Sabaeans, and beyond. Politically, Kaleb had extended Aksum's voice beyond Africa. Strategically, he now commanded the world's most vital trade routes. Spiritually, he stood as a defender of the faith. In Ethiopian tradition, the story of King Kaleb's crusade was never forgotten. It became a legend, a tale of courage and faith. When the war ended, peace slowly returned to the land of Himyar. A new ruler, Sumyafa Ashwa, chosen by King Kaleb of Aksum, sat upon the throne. Under him began a new chapter of Aksumite rule in Arabia. Sumyafa Ashwa worked to rebuild what Dhu Nuwas's war had destroyed. He promoted Christianity, restored order, and tried to bring peace between Himyar's Arab, Jewish, and Christian communities. At first, his reign was marked by tension and anger. Many of Dhu Nuwas's old supporters were punished, and the air was heavy with resentment. But with time, forgiveness began to bloom. Soon, trade returned. Ships once again crossed between Adulis and Musa. Some Aksumite soldiers and merchants even settled in Arabia permanently. Among them was one soldier who would change the story of Himyar. His name was Abraha. He had been one of Kaleb's best generals. Now, under Sumyafa Ashwa, he commanded the Aksumite garrison in Sana'a, the Himyarite capital. Around 531 to 535 CE, the Aksumite soldiers started to murmur in discontent. To them it seemed unjust that they had shed blood for the freedom of the land, yet they now took orders from a local ruler. Abraha listened to their grumblings, and deep within him, ambition began to stir like a quiet flame. Then one night, he made his move. Backed by the garrison and soldiers who adored him, Abraha rose in rebellion. Sumyafa Ashwa was overthrown, and Abraha declared himself king of Himyar. He even adopted the grand titles of the old Himyarite kings, king of Saba, Dur-Raidan, Hadramaut, and Yamanat, and established his capital in Sana'a. When news of this reached Aksum, King Kaleb was furious. His vassal had fallen, and his trusted general had rebelled. Determined to restore his authority, he sent 2 great expeditions across the Red Sea to reclaim Arabia. But both failed. Abraha's forces stood firm. Some Aksumite soldiers even defected to Abraha, preferring the wealthy and fertile land of Arabia to the highlands of Ethiopia. At last, Kaleb had no choice but to accept Abraha's rule, asking only for nominal tribute. When Kaleb later stepped down from the throne, his successors continued the same fragile understanding. Aksum remained Himyar's overlord in name, but Abraha ruled it. In the later years, Abraha proved himself to be a remarkable king. He built fortresses and irrigation systems, securing the borders and restoring order. He restored the ancient Marib Dam, a great earthwork that had irrigated the Sabaean heartland for centuries. This was one of his grandest projects. Inscriptions record that when the dam was repaired in 548 CE, a grand celebration was held. Envoys came from Aksum, Byzantium, Persia, and the Arab client states to witness it. The ceremony marked Yemen's rebirth and its new role as a peaceful meeting place for the world's great powers of the 6th century. But Abraha was not only a builder of cities, he was also a builder of faith. He was a devout Christian who walked in the same Miaphysite faith shared by Aksum and Alexandria. He built churches that shone like jewels in the desert sun. His most famous creation was the great church of Sana'a, known later as Al-Qalis. The cathedral became one of the most magnificent buildings in Arabia. Abraha was also a diplomat. He negotiated with Byzantium and Persia with equal wisdom, keeping peace with both great empires while protecting his people's freedom. Under his rule, Himyar flourished like never before. In the years after 550 CE, the Himyarite kingdom still flourished under the legacy of King Abraha. Abraha's rule marked both the height of Aksumite influence in Arabia and the beginning of its decline. Abraha ruled as a Christian king, but not as an Ethiopian vassal. His armies marched beneath his own standard, and when he led his northern campaign, most famously the expedition toward Mecca, whose full story would be lost to time, it was clear that his allegiance lay with no empire but his own. The expedition, whether successful or not, showed that Aksum's reach over its distant territories had become more symbolic than real. Even as Abraha ruled grandly in Arabia, Aksum was weakening back in Ethiopia. Its fields, once rich and green, began to suffer from changes in the land. Crops failed. Taxes fell short. Maintaining soldiers and ships across the Red Sea became a burden too heavy to bear. The once crowded harbors of Aksum grew quiet. Trade ships sailed under Persian banners, and the Byzantine-Sasanian wars turned the Red Sea into a battlefield. Persian navies prowled the waters that had once carried Aksum's merchants, and the old empire began to fade out. The decline was slow but certain. The final blow came when Abraha died, likely in the late 5-610s CE. Aksum's control over Arabia began to crumble. His sons inherited the throne, but they lacked the authority and vision to maintain the land. Without strong leadership, local rivalries returned to Arabia, and old tensions between Christians, Jews, and Arabian tribes resurfaced. Amid this chaos rose a proud Himyarite noble named Karib, also known as Saif ibn Yazan. He was determined to free his homeland from Ethiopian control, so he sought help from every corner. But Byzantium offered no aid, and the surrounding Arab tribes turned away. In desperation, Saif ibn Yazan appealed to Sasanian Persia, Aksum's great rival. The Persian king, Khosrau I Anushirvan, saw in this request a golden opportunity to extend Persian influence along the Red Sea. Around 570 CE, he sent a small but elite army led by the general Varez. Persian ships crossed from the Gulf to Hadramaut, and Warez's men marched inland toward Sana'a. There, the last Aksumite ruler, Masruk, the son of Abraha, prepared to defend his throne. But his forces were outnumbered. The battle was swift, but a brutal defeat. Masruk was slain, and the city of Sana'a fell to the Persians. With that fall, Aksum's rule in Arabia came to an end. Politically, the fall shattered Aksum's prestige. Economically, the loss was severe. The empire had poured ships, armies, and gold into its Arabian campaign. Worse still, the Persian conquest turned those efforts against Aksum itself. In short, the fall of Arabia to the Persians left Aksum weaker and poorer. By around 600 CE, Aksum had faded from a cosmopolitan empire to a kingdom struggling in isolation. In the 7th century, Islam swept through the Arabian Peninsula. The Arab conquest of the Red Sea shores sealed Aksum's fate. Muslim fleets now ruled the southern seas, replacing both Byzantine and Persian power. In 615 CE, the Aksumite rulers offered refuge to the Prophet Muhammad's early followers fleeing persecution, a moment remembered as the first Hijrah. It was an act of compassion that revealed Aksum's enduring reputation for justice and mercy, even as its power faded. But by then, the empire was an observer of history, not its maker. As the Rashidun Caliphate extended over Egypt, Syria, and the Red Sea, every trade route that once enriched Aksum closed forever. Hemmed in by the expanding Islamic world, Aksum's influence withered. By the late 7th century, its royal mint went silent. No more coins, no more gold to trade. The empire shrank to the northern Ethiopian highlands, losing its coasts and its ports. By the early 8th century, its last lifeline to the sea, Adulis, the legendary Red Sea port, was destroyed, likely between 702 and 715 CE. Whether torn down by early Islamic raids or abandoned to decay, the result was the same. Aksum had lost the sea forever. The city of Aksum remained sacred, but politically, the empire fractured. Local rulers rose, and from their midst would one day emerge the Zagwe dynasty. By the close of the 7th century, only echoes of Aksum's greatness remained, its towering monuments, its Christian faith, and its proud memory of having once ruled across the sea. From expansion to collapse, the story of Aksum's Arabian venture revealed both the height and fragility of ancient African power. At its zenith, Aksum had proved that Africa could command fleets, shape faith, and contend with the greatest empires of the age, Byzantium and Persia. Yet its fall showed how deeply its greatness rested upon the fragile tides of trade, faith, and fortune. The rise and fall of Aksum stands today as a memory of a kingdom that once reached across 3 continents, shining briefly but brightly, before retreating into legend.